Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Dana Porter, and I'm the Public Affairs Manager for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Tonight's Wanna Go Hunting webinar is all about where we can practice shooting. This evening, our guests will share information about finding firearm and archery shooting ranges, target practice opportunities, range etiquette, and safety rules. The DNR's Wanna Go Hunting webinar series is designed for all of those who are interested in learning about hunting, fishing, and trapping. Each episode features guest speakers sharing their experiences getting started with hunting and common challenges faced by those new to the sport. So with that, I will turn things over to tonight's host, Bob Knack, the DNR's Recruitment, Retention, and Reactivation Team Supervisor. Bob?
Great. Thank you, Dana, and welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for another webinar in our Wanna Go Hunting webinar series. If you've watched some of our past webinars, we've talked about how to get started. We've talked about hunting opportunities here in Wisconsin and places you can go hunting. And tonight we're going to be talking about how can you practice your shooting so when you are out hunting, you're able to hit what your intended target is. We're excited to have a great presentation for you here tonight, and we're joined by a couple of guest panelists as well. We'll have TJ Wendell. He's a DNR outdoor skills trainer based out of, lives in Beaver Dam, but covers the southeast region of the state. And we'll let TJ introduce himself a little bit more to you. And unfortunately, we don't have Kyle Benning with us tonight. Kyle was going to be joining us. He works at the McMiller Sports Complex and was traveling. Last I talked to him yesterday, and unfortunately wasn't able to make it with us tonight. And so it'll be TJ and I, and we'll do our very best to keep that conversation going. Next slide. So if you're new to hunting, hopefully you've taken a hunter education course. You've learned how to safely handle a firearm, and what's next? And in many cases, it's let's go hunting, which is certainly the intent there. But before you do that, it's always a good opportunity to practice and to hone your shooting skills, so you're comfortable with that firearm as well, and it's not awkward for you when you're out in the field. So always a good idea to shoot your gun well in advance of the hunting seasons, and to get familiar with it and practice. And every gun is a little bit different, and so you'll learn that as you shoot the various guns that are available. And so if you're thinking about doing some practice shooting, you might, depending on where you live, you might be wondering, where can I shoot? And certainly if you're in urban areas, it's not that easy to do unless you have family or friends that live more in the country that have a safe place for you to shoot. So you're probably looking for a place to shoot, and there are 11 public shooting ranges here in the state that are owned and managed by the DNR. There's certainly other public ranges and other private ranges, and I'll have that on another slide here. But the 11 that are owned by the DNR are shown on the screen here in the map. There's 4 of them in mostly southern Wisconsin, the Wautoma Shooting Range, Columbia County Shooting Range, Yellowstone Shooting Range, and the McMiller Sports Complex that I referenced earlier. The hours of operation for all these ranges may vary, and so we do have a web page that I'll direct you to that you can check out to make sure that you're there when the range is open. In most cases, the ranges have in southern Wisconsin have a little bit more restrictive hours, simply because we're closer to more people and more population centers, and those ranges likely get a lot more use than some of our ranges in northern Wisconsin. And so what to bring if your first time going to the range, you're probably wondering, what do I need to bring with me? And bring paper targets and either a stapler or some tape, whatever you're going to use to affix that to the backing. You want to remember eye and ear protection, of course, for your own safety, and certainly don't forget your firearm and the ammunition that you need to be using, that you plan to be using. So what is provided at the ranges? We do provide a shooting bench and a seat in most cases. There are target stands there, and as you'll hear in some of the regulations, we ask you not to move those target stands from where they are, and backing. And again, that's so you can affix your paper targets to those target stands. Next slide. So this is just a short list of some of the rules and regulations for our state ranges. There is a full list of the range rules in NR 45 if you care to look them up. But in talking with our range safety officers, I tried to pick some of the more common errors that they're seeing on the ranges as reminder. And again, this is for people that are brand new to visiting some of the state ranges. You may not discharge a firearm while someone is downrange. I think that's pretty straightforward. We would even take it another step to say that when somebody is downrange, simply don't be touching your gun. Obviously, when they're at the targets, they see you touching your gun, and at that distance, they don't know what you're doing. And it might be as simple as, dropping a magazine or something like that. But that's concerning to people when they see that. So simply just don't touch your gun when people are downrange. We got to make sure that all the projectiles impact the backstop. And again, that's one of the reasons, if you're looking ahead here, we don't want people shooting at targets outside of the target area. Again, if we're moving those target stands closer, in many cases, what people do, we cannot guarantee that the angle that people are shooting from the shooting benches, that projectile is going to hit the backstop. And so we ask people, to make sure that whatever they're doing, their projectiles are hitting the backstop. We ask you not to move the target stands. Shooting outside of posted hours of operation. Again, those hours are posted for a reason. The DNR does try to be good neighbors to our surrounding landowners. And as you can imagine, shooting outside of the posted hours is not very well received. And then simply clean up after yourself, picking up your targets, your casing, your ammo boxes, whatever you leave behind. Be sure to take with you. Again, that's just being a good steward of the facility and allows us to have enjoyable places for people to shoot. Next slide, please. And I mentioned, additional shooting ranges with public access. And so the DNR ranges that we manage are not the only ones in the state. There's a number of very nice county-owned and managed shooting ranges. There are private shooting ranges that you could join through a membership. And even some of those private ranges do have times where they are open to the public for public shooting. And so if you want to find some of these ranges, go to the DNR webpage and just do a keyword search of shooting ranges, and it'll pull up a really nice interactive map that you can look at it and move around the state. If you want to search by a specific county, you can get a listing by county as well. And find one near you if there's something that interests you. And I would encourage you to go look at their webpage then, if they have one, to get a better understanding of the services they offer and their hours, and if they are indeed open to some level of public access. In many cases on that interactive map, it'll tell you the opportunities that are provided there, whether it's just simply a rifle range, if they have a handgun range, or if they do offer some clay target shooting as well. So it's a really nice feature there to check out. And in many cases there too, especially for the state-owned ranges, we'll have our hours posted there. And so again, before you travel, it's a good idea to check it out so you know what the hours are and can follow those hours of operation when you're shooting. So next slide. And this is the last slide before we start talking with our guest panelists, but in talking with our range safety officers, they've commented that some new shooters that are new to the ranges simply don't know range etiquette and haven't been there before, and so they're not quite sure how to behave and how to act, and that's not necessarily in a bad way. It's unfamiliar to them. So thought I'd point out a couple things here to think about if you are making your first trip to the range. TJ and I are going to talk a little bit more about that during our discussion. But really, some of the basic safety, firearm safety rules to follow: treat every firearm as if it is loaded. Always point the muzzle in a safe direction, downrange when you are at a shooting range. Be sure of the target, what's in front and what's beyond. That applies when we're hunting as well. Keep the finger off the trigger until you are ready to shoot. Again, that comes with, got to remember, you're going to have other people around you shooting, and when they see you handling your gun, I think everybody wants to make sure that we're handling that gun safely. So never leave a loaded firearm unattended, even if you're just going to be gone for a quick minute and come back. Again, there could be other people in the shooting shed that you're using, and we would hate for them to pick up your gun or have to handle your gun without understanding if it's loaded or not. So always good to just never leave a loaded firearm unattended. Follow all ceasefire orders, and in some cases, our ranges do have a range safety officer. In many cases, they do not, and people are operating on their own goodwill and intentions. And in those situations, anybody at the range can be a range safety officer and yell ceasefire. And so if you see something unsafe that somebody next to you is doing, and they may not even realize that what the action they're doing is unsafe, yell ceasefire. And then of course it's everybody's responsibility to listen and honor that ceasefire. You can really never be too safe. And so if you see something, say something. And we want to keep everybody safe at the ranges. I mentioned eye and ear protection again, but bring your own safety glasses, and earplugs or earmuffs are always a good idea. And use courtesy and common sense. I was just talking to one of our volunteers at one of the ranges today, and he was commenting that the people that come to the range are always in a good mood, and treat him very nicely, and it's just an overall enjoyable experience. And I think that's probably true of many things. When you're having fun and looking forward to doing something, people tend to be in a good mood that are enjoying the same thing. And so be respectful of each other, and get a chance to know the range safety officer and your fellow shooters as well. It's also a nice way to get to meet people. So next slide, please. So here's some contact information for you if you do have any questions. I don't know if we said at the beginning of the webinar, if you do have questions, you can use the Q&A feature on the YouTube channel to type them in, and we'll be sure to answer those questions at the end of the webinar here this evening. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to myself. My email and phone number is there, as well as Quinn Erdman. And Quinn is our hunting and shooting sports program assistant and quite familiar with the ranges here in the state as well. And so Quinn is another great source of information for you. Next slide. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation of quick information that I had for you, and so now we'll move into the discussion period with our panelists this evening. And again, I mentioned that Kyle wasn't able to join us, and so it's going to be TJ and I tonight talking a little bit about the shooting ranges. And TJ, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself and maybe explain a little bit your experience with our shooting ranges, how long you've been shooting, and and give that kind of a background information.
Yeah, for sure, Bob. So great to be here. As Bob said, my name's TJ Wendell. I'm the outdoor skills trainer in the Southeast region with the Wisconsin DNR. So I help out with a lot of our safety programs, so hunter ed, boat, snow, ATV, and then I also get to help out with our R3 programming and shooting sports programming. I'm an adult onset hunter and an adult onset shooter. I was a target shooter and a competitive target shooter before I got into hunting. And I started shooting largely at state public ranges. So that was my real first intro into getting out and shooting. And since then I've shot at public ranges, private ranges that are open to the public. Kind of all over the southeast part of the state. So I live in Beaver Dam now, but I've lived in Whitewater in the Milwaukee area as well. So frequented a number of the ranges in the area. And excited to be here and happy to kind of help talk about, I think I'm a great case study as somebody who was a novice who came to it and has now kind of come full circle and, I'm a professional.
Well, that's great, TJ. Thanks again for joining us tonight. I think you're gonna offer some great insights here to people that are similar to your situation, at least a few years ago, that are interested in learning about hunting and shooting and recreational shooting as well. So maybe starting out here with question number one, TJ, interested in your thoughts on this. Visiting a shooting range for the first time can be very intimidating, right? There's guns going off, it's loud, and you're amongst people that you may not know, and so they're strangers to you. Do you have any advice for a first-time visitor to a range? I mean, what would you tell somebody that's going to be taking that on for the first time?
Yeah, as you hinted at for in the slides, I would say the two best things you can do beforehand is to, if the range has a website, a lot of times they're going to have range rules posted on the website. They might have etiquette. They might have a map of like where the registration building is, because you might show up and it's a large parking lot and kind of where do I need to go? So that's a great place to go to kind of get a little bit of preparation. If there's not a lot of information on the website, or there isn't a website, but there's a phone number you can call, you might be able to call and get a hold of, talk to somebody who works there if they have full-time staff, or leave a message and somebody might be able to get back to you, can kind of give you a little bit of information that way. But also when you show up and you do get there, again, almost every range I've been to is going to have range rules posted pretty prominently, and usually in multiple places around the range. So, looking for those signs and kind of reading any signs that you see, and then looking for if there is, a place you need to go sign in, if you need to pay any user fees, anything like that. And normally, if there is a sign-in booth or registration building, there's going to be folks obviously staffing that and letting them know, hey, I'm a new shooter, or even if you've been shooting for a while, but it's your first time going to this range, that you're new to that range and you'd like to know, what the range rules are, understand where things are located. And, in my experience, the folks that work at our ranges are always more than willing, especially if you say, hey, I'm new and I don't want to do the wrong thing. They'd much rather have that conversation ahead of time to educate you, so that they don't have, an accident, or they don't have to kind of, correct something that's, happening that isn't maybe exactly the way it's supposed to go. Because, you'd mention, weapons handling during ceasefires or when people are downrange. Some ranges might have very specific things they want you to do, with your rifle or your shotgun during a ceasefire. They might have a place they want you to put it. They might want you to put a loaded chamber indicator, a chamber flag into the gun, so that visually the range officers can see that the gun is unloaded. So, asking those questions to say, what all do I need to do ahead of time is great. And they can walk you through all of that information. then making sure you read the range rules. If it's a range that doesn't have range officers actively there, and there's other people there that happen to be shooting, walk up, introduce yourself, say, hey, I'm, so-and-so, it's my first time at this range, or, I'm just getting into shooting. I was wondering if you could explain kind of rules, etiquette to me. I just want to make sure that, I'm doing everything safely in the right way. Again, in my experience, normally people who are interested in shooting are going to love, your biggest risk there is they're going to talk your ear off, and you're going to be there for 30 minutes talking about stuff before you actually get to shoot. But, they're probably going to be another great resource to kind of give you some information and help you out.
Yeah, no, that's great response there, TJ. Yeah, and people new to a range are gonna, you're gonna have to come out of your shell a little bit and talk to people. And like TJ said, if there isn't a range safety officer there, of course you're gonna have to communicate with the other shooters about when you're gonna check your targets and change them out. And so another good point that I like, TJ, was that they're going to talk your ear off. And that's true. I mean, it's true of hunters and it's true of recreational shooters as well. If they enjoy what they're doing, they're going to want to help you out. And they're probably, depending on their situation, might be there for the social aspects of it as well. And so, yeah, those are some really great points. So, again, visiting a range for the first time, people, as I mentioned before, might be handling a gun for the first time as well. And the more times that you visit a range, you're going to get more comfortable. The more times you handle your gun, you're going to get more comfortable with it. But when people are there for the first time with a new gun, TJ, do you have any tips for them? If they're at all uncomfortable with it?
Yeah, so one of the things, the platform that we're actually on right now, YouTube, is a marvelous resource. A lot of manufacturers have tutorial videos of how to do everything from, maintenance work on firearms to how to load and unload and use the safety. There's also, other, big national organizations like the NSSF and other groups that have YouTube channels with tutorials on how firearms work. So that's a great place to go. Obviously, the manuals that come with your firearm are also a great thing to read through to make sure you understand how the safety works, how to load and unload the weapon. But, even without doing that, when you're at the store buying your, rifle, shotgun, pistol for the first time, having the salesperson that you're working with at the store kind of walk through, how would I load this? How would I unload it? Where's the safety? How does it work? They should have, pretty good familiarity, or have a coworker there who does with that particular firearm and can make sure you're really comfortable before you even leave the store with how it works. So you've kind of got that knowledge. Similarly, again, like we said, folks are friendly. If you're there and it's like, hey, it's my first time, I just got this, this new firearm, asking a range safety officer to kind of, I think I know how everything works, but it'd be great if you could, watch me, or I could show you. Again, those folks are going to be a great resource for you. Other shooters at the range, they may not be familiar with your particular firearm, so they may or may not be able to help you out. But again, wouldn't be a bad person to talk to kind of get some information from. But yeah, that, and then like I said, the manufacturers' websites, check to see if they have, social media accounts. Many of them do now, and a lot of them have posted instructional videos. And then a lot of other, stores like Midway USA is a large online retailer that sells a lot of firearms and cleaning accessories, and they've got a lot of videos on how different firearms work, how to clean different firearms. So those can be great sources as well to go to. Just with anything, when you're looking at stuff on YouTube, you always want to validate the source that you're going to make sure that you're getting, good, safe information.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, TJ, and thinking about new guns, and if somebody's interested in looking for a gun, they say they want to start doing some shooting themselves. Do you have any advice for people on what they should be thinking about or considering when they're doing their gun shopping?
Yeah, I mean, so firearms are tools, and there's just like there's a million different screwdrivers for a million different screws. There's a whole lot of different firearms that do different things. So kind of having an idea of, are you really just looking at target shooting, learning a specific type of target shooting, like like pistols or shotguns for shooting trap or skeet. Are you going to be hunting? And if so, what are you going to be hunting? Because obviously the rifle that you'd want to buy to hunt, coyotes or squirrels is going to be different than the rifle that you would buy to hunt, deer or bear. So getting an idea of what you're wanting to do first is good. And it might be a whole number of things, and that's okay. And then the next big thing to kind of think about would be your price range. Like many recreational hobbies, you can spend as much money as you want to just about in terms of buying a firearm. So having a budget in mind. And this is another great, you can go online, you can look at a lot of big retailers to get an idea of what the different price ranges are for firearms to help you with setting that budget. But after you've kind of got those two things in mind, I would say finding, local gun store to go into or sporting goods store, and talking to the staff that's there. They're going to be great to kind of help you with selecting, what it is that you're looking to do. And again, there's also a lot of other, myriad of media sources, available from the classic, Field and Stream, to Meat Eater and everything else that have articles about different calibers and types of guns and everything else that you can kind of use as research points to kind of help answer some of those questions for yourself as well.
Thanks, TJ. My internet's I'm catching every couple words from you, so I apologize if I'm pausing here. I want to make sure you're finished. And I don't think you covered this in your answer, but people that buy, especially a new rifle, oftentimes come from the store to the range, and they'll show up with a rifle in a box, or maybe the scope is attached, and they say, well, it was bore sighted at the shop. And we know that many hunters or shooters don't know what bore sighted means, and they think that they can go set up on the 100-yard range and start hitting bullseyes. And so we know that's not the case. So do you have any advice for people? Well, number one, to talk a little bit about what bore sighted is, but then, how do you properly sight in a rifle that you may have purchased right from the store?
Yeah. So bore sighting is, very simply, you're shining a laser through the barrel of the rifle at a target at a not that terribly far distance, and then you're aligning roughly the if there's a scope, the scope, if there's some other kind of sighting device, that, or the iron sights, with that laser dot. Now, again, bullets have an arc, so lining up that dot is not necessarily going to be where your particular bullet is going to go. So it's going to be close, but not that close. So as you start to shoot further and further away, your accuracy is going to diminish from that bore sight. So really what bore sighting is doing is putting you in a position where at 25 yards, you're going to be on your target and relatively close to the center of that target. but with the intent that you're going to have to start at that, 25, 30-yard distance, and adjust your sight, whether it's iron sights, or a scope, or like a red dot, whatever it happens to be. Start adjusting it at that distance, to get it as close to dead center as you can. And then when you go from that, 25-yard range out to, let's say, 50 yards, when you're shooting it at 50 yards, you'll probably notice that you're not dead center anymore again, because again, as that bullet continues to travel, if it's going, I'll draw here on my screen with my finger up, if it's going perfectly straight, but if it's just veering off just a little bit, the further and further you get away, you can see the further it's kind of drifting off. So going from that near distance to a slightly further distance, you're going to have to adjust it again. And then going out even further to 100 yards. And then depending on how far you're ultimately looking at shooting, just continuing to kind of step out incrementally and then make adjustments. And, you're probably, if you have it bore sighted, assume if you're going to buy ammunition, buy at least a box of ammunition to use to get your rifle sighted in before your hunting season. You want to shoot a couple of rounds. I know if, ammunition can be expensive, and there's the temptation to just want to shoot one and then adjust everything. Best practice is usually shoot 3 to 5 rounds, because then that's going to establish a pattern so that that it wasn't like, oh, well, I coughed, or I moved funny, or, something happened. There was a big gust of wind, and this is actually an anomaly. Then you start adjusting for that anomaly. Then you go out to the next distance and you're off, but not in a way you were predicting you would be. So having that, 20 plus rounds to work on getting yourself really dialed in is probably, a good minimum to set. Obviously, more practice is better. So if you can, buy more ammunition, have more there to be able to work with it. Again, most of your big box retailers and gun stores are probably going to have equipment there to validate the bore sight. So if you're buying a gun that's coming from the manufacturer with a scope on it, they might have a bore sight in the store that they can check and validate that, yes, it is the way it's supposed to be. If you're buying a gun and the scope separately, or the sight separately, and they're installing it, you want to make sure that they do bore sight it, because if they don't bore sight it, even at 25 yards, you could potentially be, off the paper target, where you're going to have a real hard time knowing what exactly it is you need to do. Some of our ranges, may have stuff there to be able to help bore sight as well. This is something I know McMiller offers that as a service. Usually if you check their website or call, they'll be able to let you know if it's something that they can help you with there at the range. But definitely want to make sure that you've kind of gotten that validated, that yes, it's bore sighted, and then all right, if I go and I shoot at 25 or 30 yards, I'm going to be kind of in the zone of where I want to be, and I'll be able to start adjusting out from there.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure that'll be very helpful advice there. And like I said, it's not uncommon for, especially a new shooter, to show up at the range and thinking they're ready to go. And so again, talk to the people around you. Most times people are very, very willing to help out. All right. Thanks, TJ. And the last question I have for discussion tonight, before we check in to see if we had any questions throughout the webinar. We talked about, and I shared what to bring when you go to the range and what to expect. And that's the very basics of what you need to remember. But is there any equipment that you really rely on when you go to the range that isn't a have to have, but it sure is a nice to have, that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, so probably one of the two most useful things that I've had tool-wise would be a multi-tool with a bit set, and the bits being the bits that you'd need for adjusting scope mounts, for adjusting the actual sight itself. So sometimes, especially modern, like if you've got a turkey shotgun with a red dot, it may not be those big slots like you have on a rifle scope that you could even use a key, like a car key or a coin, to be able to turn you might need a really fine tip screwdriver to get in there and adjust the sight, to change your elevation and your windage, your left to right movement. So having a nice tool set is good that way. Also, if you notice you get there and a scope mount might be ever so slightly loose, always better to touch that up and tighten that down before you start shooting, because as you start shooting, that impact will shake that loose, and then you'll look up and you'll notice that your scope's just flopping around, and now you basically have to, get it resighted and tighten it all down and start all over because you've lost all the accuracy that you had. So that's really helpful. The other thing I always like to have with me is a cleaning kit. Mostly on the off chance, let's say, you're shooting and you've got a bolt action rifle and you open up your bolt and you pull the bolt back, and the shell casing doesn't come out for whatever reason. It kind of got stuck or hung up in the chamber a little bit. Having that multi-tool you can use to kind of pull that out, but having a cleaning rod that you can use to help push that out is good. Also, if it's, a really bad day, let's say the gun gets really wet or it falls on the ground and the muzzle gets dirty, you've got a cleaning kit there. You can kind of do some, kind of quick clean work there if you need to. But even when I'm out hunting, I always like to have a cleaning rod of some kind or a wire coated, cleaning tool, just in case I get, anything obstructed in your muzzle. You may not think that it's an issue having a little bit of dirt with how fast that bullet's going out of there, but it can cause the pressure to build up bad in the weapon that can, at best case scenario, just damage the firearm. Worst case scenario could potentially injure you. So great thing to have with, so then you don't have to kind of stop shooting for the day if your barrel gets plugged with mud for some reason. Not on the tool side, but something else I always like to have is a bottle of water. So a lot of ranges are not going to have concession stands available. And when I go, shooting, if I'm going to be there for a while, I don't want to have to leave. So having, some water to, stop. Also, again, ammunition is really expensive. If you take a break and have a little snack, you can take and kind of stretch out your time a little bit, slow down your shooting, have a little bit more fun with it. So that's a nice thing to have. And then, first aid kit's always a good thing to have with, not necessarily that you're gonna, something catastrophic is gonna happen, but you could get a splinter on a shooting bench or a paper cut from a paper target, so always handy to have that kind of a thing with you wherever you happen to be out, doing stuff. But those are all. Then the other big one that I would say I didn't mention with tools that was something I did not have when I first started shooting and now won't go to a range without is either a spotting scope or binoculars. I bought a really nice pair of binoculars because I wanted them to use for other things, and I didn't have a lot of other uses for a spotting scope. But being able to look at your target, now you might think if you're using a scope, like, what do I need another thing for? But if your target's far enough away and you're shooting a really small caliber, like let's say you've got a 243, which is a common whitetail cartridge, that's punching very tiny holes in a piece of paper, and you may not see those holes through your scope at 100 yards. So having something with a little bit more magnification, whether it's binoculars or a spotting scope, means that you're not having to, every time you shoot 2 or 3 rounds, you've now either got to wait until everyone else is done shooting and there's a ceasefire, or if you're the only person at the range, just having to go walk 100 yards every time you shoot 3 rounds to see, all right, that's where I'm hitting, then you've got to walk back. So if you're working on getting sighted in and you're making those adjustments to your optic, being able to kind of, quick check if you're not seeing those target holes, where you're hitting, so then you can make those adjustments is a really big, handy thing to have. I think that's all I've got on kind of equipment, nice to have stuff that I can think of right now.
Can you hear me okay, TJ?
I can now, yep.
All right, I left the meeting for a little bit, but I'm back. And so I missed the end of it. But one thing I was going to mention too is that sandbags in a rest. Of course, there's a bench there, but always nice to have your gun be able to rest on something. And we've rolled up towels. If you don't have sandbag, roll up a towel to give you a nice rest for your gun. So just another tip there for some things you might want to bring with you to the range. Well, I think we covered a lot of ground there, TJ, and I really appreciate your insights. I think the listeners here are gonna really benefit from your answers there. And so, Katie, let's see if we had any questions that came in that were typed in during the webinar.
Yeah, we have one here from Scott. I don't know if you guys will have the exact answer, but I think you can get him close, at least in terms of where to find the answer. So Scott's wondering, I don't have a range by me. What are the legal distances from roads, habitable residences, roadways, property lines, etc.? Understanding that you need to know what's behind your target, obviously.
Yeah, I can take a swing at it, TJ. You can correct me if I'm wrong or if you want to add. But as far as from the road, I believe it's 50 feet from the center line of the road. From any dwellings that aren't your own, you need to have, I believe you need to be 100 yards from somebody unless you have permission. And so, yeah, and of course, if you're going to, develop your own range or shoot in a situation like that that's not on a range, be certain of your target and what's beyond, and be respectful of your neighbors around you, of course, as well. So TJ, I don't know if you have anything more to answer to that.
Yeah, I would say if you're planning on potentially going to shoot on any, public land, northern part of the state, there's a lot of federal land. There's a lot of state forests. It's really good to make sure that you're allowed to target shoot on that particular property. So for the DNR properties, it'll be on the website if that's something that's allowable there. I know in the southern part of the state, none of our forests that I'm aware of allow target shooting in the state forests outside of designated ranges. So if you're going to be going to a property that's not your own or privately owned, always good to make sure that just because it's open to hunting doesn't mean that it's open to target shooting. So always good to double check that. And if you've got a question, if it's, state-owned land, you could always reach out to whoever your local field warden is, and you can look up your local conservation wardens on the DNR website. You could call the local sheriff's office. If it's federally owned property, you could reach out to whatever federal agency is overseeing that in the area and call their local office, and they should be able to tell you if it isn't posted.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, TJ. In my mind, I was thinking about private lands, and so I'm glad you covered the public land there as well. Anything else, Katie? Any other questions?
That is all that we have for tonight.
Okay, great. Well, I think that concludes the webinar for this evening. Again, thank you to our guest, TJ, for being with us here tonight. And thank you to everybody that's listening, and we hope that you benefit from these webinars. And our next webinar is going to be in a few weeks here in early November, and we'll be talking about how to find a hunting mentor or a hunting partner if you're new and you don't have somebody to go with. We'll be chatting about just how to find somebody that you could learn from and would show you the ropes. So please join us at that time. With that, Dana, I'll turn it back over to you.
Wonderful, Bob. Thank you. Again, like he mentioned, we'll be back in a few weeks with our next Wanna Go Hunting webinar. In the meantime, you can always find your adventure in Wisconsin by visiting dnr.gov.